First of all, I know I'm super late with this. However, I felt like I needed to get the full Elden Ring experience before doing anything video related with it. So I've now completed the game once, completely blind, where I explored as much as I could and fought everything I encountered, and one new game plus run, where I mostly focused on the main story, as well as a couple of side quests. However, after my first playthrough I was extremely burnt out by the game, for reasons I'll get into later in this video. That's why this video is so late to the party, and also why the footage you'll see during this video is from the new game plus run. Don't get me wrong, I do believe this game deserves some of the love it's been showered with since its release back in February, as well as some of its criticisms. As an avid Dark Souls pro, I of course was pretty hyped when I heard about the development of Elden Ring. An even bigger world with monsters and weapons? What's there not to be hyped about? And even though I tried my hardest to avoid spoilers, I couldn't avoid knowing you also would be able to have a mount as well, and that tickled my fancy in every kind of way. Also, I've heard there were a lot of instability issues and bugs and bad patches. I, however, have only ever experienced the odd crash a handful of times out of all these flaws, so I can only go out of my own experience during this video. Fair warning though, this will be a convoluted mess of just my thoughts on the game, desperately edited to make sense. This is not a review or a critique or anything like that. It's simply me and my thoughts as I went through the game both on my first and second playthrough. So without any further ado, let's begin. The day came and the game dropped. I was hyped. I was ready. I was dropped right into the character creation, and the different origins or classes really made my childlike glee perk up. I did as I usually do when delving into new FromSoft games and chose the Knight, or it's called in Elden Ring the Vagabond. I know it's a safe option, but every new adventure I like to go in sword and shield for the exploration, and then when I'm accustomed to the world I experiment with builds. I carefully chose an original name and began fiddling with the base template. All of these seemed pretty cool, but one caught my eye. The Draconian. It had, as the descriptions tell, the stony face of the people of the ancient dragons, among whom life is typically short. I thought the Draconians perhaps had some sort of significance and maybe had some extra dragon powers, but alas, I was sadly mistaken. Then there's the Keepsake. All of these are completely new to me, but the Golden Seed stood out to me as a safe option, so I chose that, and the intro cutscene started. FromSoft has done it again, I thought to myself. This build-up is incredible. I can't wait to begin my adventure in this new land filled with powerful foes and loot. I was dropped into some sort of chapel, and I remember the immediate feeling of, oh, this feels just like Dark Souls. Well, except now I have a jump button. My immediate impression of the game was poor, and I have sunk so many hours into the Souls franchise, and I was not prepared to sink even more hours into something that at the start felt like a clone. I, however, pressed on and met boss after boss, rummaging through the different dungeons and caverns, and got absolutely bodied every step of the way. I played over Discord with friends, and slowly but surely this world of Limgrave opened up my eyes. This perhaps played and felt a bit like the other Souls games, but there was still a lot to love here, right? So many new things I've never experienced before, and so many awesome things to come, I'm sure. Even though I know every nook and cranny of the other Soulsborne games, this game was completely new to me, and the feeling of adventure and exploration really got me hooked. The more I played, the harder the game became to put down, and the first couple of hours felt devastatingly brutal, as well as fair. If I died, it was my fault, and I couldn't get enough of it, and the blindingly beautiful world it was happening in. I found the story of Miyazaki and George Martin to be enticing and incredibly well populated by interesting characters that I personally wanted to know more about. I found myself talking to everyone I encountered on my first playthrough and tried to learn as much about the world as I could. The story in Elden Ring is way more straightforward than the earlier From Software games in my opinion, although it's still a good contender for most questions raised after finishing the game. Here NPCs feel way more lenient when it comes to giving you information about the world. You traverse the beautiful vistas of the lands between and encounter a myriad of interesting people who all have a lot to share about these lands. If you're interested in the lore, I would suggest checking out Varividya, Ginji, the Ashen Hollow, or the plethora of other extremely talented people which devote their time to deciphering the convoluted story that are these games. As if you didn't know any of these from before. The feeling I got when first entering Limgrave from the tutorial area was something I never thought I'd experience again. It has been talked about to death at this point, so I won't beat this dead horse anymore. I'll just tap it a bit by saying it was an amazing impression. Exploring the world felt natural, and its beauty made me want to delve deeper into the different vistas it offered. The only other game I ever felt like this, the giddy exploration, must be when I first played Oblivion or Dragon's Dogma way back when. The way the graces pointed me in the direction of the next boss was a subtle way of nudging the player in the intended direction, without making it too in-your-face as other open-world games tend to do with map markers. The grace pointed me northbound to Stormvale Castle, and I met the first major boss of the game. The bosses in Elden Ring, and basically the entire Souls franchise, has always been the climax and the reason most players again and again delve into these massive worlds. I have always enjoyed the sentiment Miyazaki pushed when first developing Demon's Souls. His story about getting help from strangers being a mechanic he wanted to implement through messages and summoning. Summoning other players has always been one of the most enjoyable ways to play these games in my experience. The fact that a random player from anywhere in the world takes time out of their day to help me to overcome an obstacle is so wholesome. It's nothing more than that really. Having strangers help me without me knowing them before or after, as a way of paying it forward, is really such a nice sentiment that I personally like. In my experience, the summoning of others has heightened my enjoyment, and I will be forever grateful for the implementation of this mechanic in Elden Ring as well. Therefore, you'll probably see a couple of summons in the upcoming boss fights. Margit was my first big obstacle, at least if you don't count the tree sentinel right out of the gate. He felt extremely punishing and way faster than I felt he had the right to be. I beat my head on this wall of progression for countless hours before I felt the need to branch out and explore the world a bit more, and then, when I came back, Margit the Fell Omen was defeated. Honestly, I felt he was a bit unfair with his incredibly long combos and pretty short punish windows. Guess I just needed to bump up my numbers enough to completely obliterate him. Also, the name Margit is a Scandinavian woman's name, which made me giggle when he first appeared. Stormvale Castle felt like a breath of fresh air to me. Although I initially was disappointed by the feeling of souls, the legacy dungeons, as has been coined in Elden Ring, really made me feel at home. It was cramped, full of dangerous foes, and the jumping mechanic made the castle even more traversable than one would first imagine. After completing Stormvale and happening upon Godric, I hit another roadblock. Therefore, I went on another exploratory escapade. I found an ornate chest and was ensnared and sent to a crystal cave in the lands of Caelid. This place just screams decay, and if the blood-red sky didn't give it away, the demon birds and giant T-Rex doggos should do the trick. This place is filled to the brim with rot and decay, and tons of dangerous foes and awesome equipment. I mostly traveled on horseback throughout Caelid and found what I think is every side of grace, and managed to gear up and level up enough to kick Godric's ass. This fight was difficult. He hits like a truck and has tons of moves and combos at his disposal. However, he seemed way more fair to me than Margit the Scandinavian old lady. The only move I even would consider unfair is the incredibly short wind-up he has when starting his tornado spin attack. Other than that, this was an incredible fight. Halfway through the boss fight, he cuts off his own arm and attaches instead a freaking dragon head which comes to life and spews fire. How insane is that? After several attempts I managed to defeat him, and the feeling of beating an insurmountable foe filled me with vigor and excitement for the things to come. After defeating Godric, I went back to Caelid. I had noticed the castle in the distance and I wanted to check it out. This is the castle of Radahn, and oh my god, this fight is a spectacle. I can't really put into words the excitement and adrenaline I felt when battling this huge beast of a man. And the fact one can summon tons of other NPCs to help you just solidifies this as one of the most spectacular fights in recent memory. One of, not the most I must add. The most comes later. It just looks so cool, and the way the NPCs beforehand talk about the Radahn festival, where the greatest fighters of the lands between gather to once and for all defeat the great Radahn, just makes it even better in my opinion. Also, my face when he became a meteor must have been priceless. I did not expect that. Defeating Radahn opens up the way to a different part of the underground area of the world, the part where Blade talks about when following Ranni's questline, but we'll get more into that later. The arena of Godric leads out to Liurnia of the Lakes, a vast, beautiful landscape full of branching paths and tons of different enemies, most of which are sorcery-based ones. The path leads onward and I find a glintstone key, the one adventure this fellow was talking about. The exploration of Liurnia felt natural and fun, and I never got tired of it. I used the key and was transported to the Academy of Rea Lucaria, which is another legacy dungeon, which felt extremely well designed in my opinion. I wanted to explore each nook and cranny, and I had to be on my toes every second because I never knew what would spring out around the corner. The academy was so stunning I lost track of time, and before I knew it I stood before Red Wolf of Radagon. I don't know the lore here, but I remember getting a feeling that it looked misplaced. It never felt like any real roadblock for me on either playthrough really, and I felt like it was placed there more because the developers felt like it had been some time since there was a boss health bar at the bottom of the screen. He was a cool fight though, a magic wielding wolf with a magic lightning sword. Awesome. I continued and found myself outside of Renala's boss room, and my thoughts immediately went back to Fool's Idol and Demon Souls. The gimmick is quite easy to comprehend, and I found it enjoyable to beat the living shit out of these goddamn annoying book-slinging sons of a bitch. Her second phase is even cooler with an amazing arena. She actually attacks you this time, and packed quite a punch. She was still no match for my New Game Plus Broman though. Defeating Renala unlocks the ability to respec, which I found incredibly satisfying. It costs a larval tear, but these are plentiful enough for a normal playthrough and will make it super easy to try out new builds. I at least never felt I didn't have enough larval tears for respecking. As mentioned several times, the exploration of these games feel extremely natural, and I never felt I had to grind or go out of my way to find story-related items that propelled me forward. My entire playthrough was propelled by the world inviting me to explore, and thus giving me the necessary items to progress. After finding the two halves of the Dectus medallion, I was now at Altus Plateau. Here I find a woman which I helped earlier in Liurnia. She invites me to Volcano Manor for helping her, and I accept. This transports me to the audience chamber of Tanith. This whole area is so foreboding and has this eerie feel to it. I remember the first time I got here, the feeling of awe just really struck me. Tanith asked me to join her, and heck, sure, I'm in. She then asked me to do some dirty work for her, and I accept. I then begin to explore the manor, and I find a hidden passageway to a vast open area with buildings and lava all over. This place looks so cool. I have to give it to FromSoft. They've really upped their lava game this time around. I find the Godskin Apostle and make swift work of it. And then I find yet another secret passage which tickles my fancy in every kind of way. It just feels so good to find secrets in games, it's just so rewarding. The hidden path leads me to Rykard, a large serpent. I pick up the weapon that's given to us at the start of the arena and fight him. And this is such a spectacular looking gimmick fight. Of course you can defeat him without the Serpent Slayer, but I think you'll have a bad time doing that. This fight harkens back to the Storm King fight in Demon Souls and Yorm in Dark Souls 3. I like it. It's not too difficult, and the only moves I found hard to dodge were his summoning of Flaming Skulls and his large area of effect slam. Still, this fight really got noted as a high point for me. After this, I went to do Tanith's bidding, but since I had defeated Rykard, she didn't want much to do with us anymore and she left. On my second playthrough, I went through the game kinda all over, and since I got teleported to Volcano Manor from the Altus Plateau, I had to fast travel back and take the elevator again to get back to the plateau. From here I had several options and I went left into Mount Gelmir. This is a mountain area which employs a pretty vertical layout. I explored and eventually found Demi-Human Queen Maggie, which made my day rather difficult. I eventually managed to defeat her and her minions, but this fight was not anything I'd write home about. This also felt like something where the devs felt it had been too long since a boss fight. But then I interacted with this guy. On my first playthrough nothing happened and I left. On my second playthrough, however, I was a bit more patient and got the Comet Azure, lauded as the best spell in the game. It requires 60 intelligence, and we both know I'm not that smart. But it was a cool secret nonetheless. The Altus Plateau then led me into the capital, and I vividly remember the grand sight that met me when I stepped out into Lanedale capital. Just look at this. Stunning. This place is another, if I'm not mistaken, legacy dungeon. However, it is huge, and on my first playthrough I spent hours searching every nook and cranny of this place. Mostly because I was certain this was the end of the line, and I wanted to explore as much as I could before finishing the game. Oh boy was I wrong. I progressed through the capital, having a blast being destroyed by the knights wandering the area, as well as the Erdtree avatar in the center. I found a side of grace and sat down and Melanie appeared. To be honest, I had forgotten about her at this point. She is grateful for bringing her this far and says she now can roam free by herself. We say our goodbyes and she's off. I then walk up these giant branches and meet Godfrey, the first Elden Lord. Or at least a golden spectre of him. I didn't really enjoy this fight on either playthrough. On my first playthrough it already felt like this fight didn't really matter since it was a spectre. And then on my second playthrough I knew what was to come and the fight lost even more oomph because of that. I don't know, it was a bit of a letdown in my opinion. Further on I found what has to be the gold standard of final boss area. This place just screams end of the line to me. And I also see Mela's summon sign. I didn't notice this on my first playthrough, so now I wanted to see what would happen if I summoned her. We enter and Morgott appears. He's identical to Margit, and I remember feeling quite let down when I first saw this. Although I rationed to myself that it'd be fitting to have the first boss be the last as well. I still feel let down on fighting this boss again because I still feel the same I did my first time around. Lanedale Capital, in my opinion, is a perfect way to end the game. You could just slap a different boss here and call it a day, but boy would I be in for a surprise. Melina and I fight Morgott and he is quite a fun fight to be honest. He's still a bit too fast for me and my old reflexes, but having Melina by my side made it easier. He's got the same movesets as Margit, but ups his arsenal quite a bit during the fight by having this awesome looking rain of magical daggers spawn around him. On my first playthrough I remember the feeling of satisfaction after his defeat and then walking up to the Erdtree ready to end the game, only to be slapped in the face by this message. And Melina giving me a new medallion and sending me to the mountaintops of the giants. I'm sorry, but the build up to Morgott's fight made me really feel like this was the end of the line, and I really felt like it would be a great ending. And it took a bit of steam out of me to learn the game had even more. I had arrived at the Erdtree, the main goal of the entire game, and now I had to do even more chores. It was quite an ambivalent experience, and I couldn't wrap my mind around how the game could keep up the quality for how many hours were left. Needless to say, I was a bit apprehensive to move forward. However, I follow Melanie's request and take the ground lift up to the mountaintops, and a massive chunk of the map opens up yet again. Oh damn, I think to myself, I'm not even halfway there. The mountaintops unfortunately felt underwhelming to me, both because I was running on fumes as well as there was a lot of reused enemies here, and I found myself charging through on torrent most of the time. Although the areas are still stunning though, and this bridge, what an incredible sight to behold. The mountaintops led me straight to the fire giant, most likely the largest enemy in the entire game. I found it to be a pretty spectacular fight, but pretty difficult to manage because of the camera. Halfway through, a face opens up on his stomach and he looks eerily similar to another boss we're quite familiar with on this channel. Although that boss doesn't mutilate himself. My mimic and I defeat him, and I remember the feeling that this is a grand finale. But no, Melanie begins to burn and sends us to this floating dragon place. To be honest, I completely forgot about this place on my New Game Plus run. I was certain the mountaintops of the giants were the last level of sorts, but as soon as I spawned in after Melanie set fire to the Earth Tree, I couldn't help but feel like they got pulled out of me once again. This game has even more? Was the only thought in my head. Honestly, both on my first and second playthrough. Still, the beauty and level of detail this area holds will forever be engraved in my memory as one of the best looking areas in any game to date. This area really has it all. Vertical level design, great level design really, tons of different hard hitting enemies and tons of upgrade materials. Also, tons of copy pasted dragons. At some point I think the devs felt the dragon fights were a bit tedious, so they gave this one only a sliver of health. Here, in this area, we find my favorite boss in the game, Desereves. He's incredibly well hidden, and the runner-up for worst boss run ever. Still, the spectacle of the fight makes up for the long run back. You lay down here and the world begins to rewind. And suddenly you find yourself in this huge area with this two-headed dragon floating in the distance. Amazing. There's been a while since I had this much fun fighting a boss in any game. The only other time I can think where I had this much fun was Lady Maria of the Astral Clock Tower in Bloodborne or Ishin the Sword Saints in Sekiro. This fight against Desereves is amazing. It's simply so well put together in my opinion. It's quite easy to read and his hitboxes aren't as janky as some others. And the lock-on helps tremendously when he's teleporting around. 10 out of 10 would run back again. Further on in the dragon area, I'm in Faramazula, we meet Godskin Duo. Just know, these are awful one-on-one and the duo feels like someone tried their hardest to make a bargain bin Orsin and Smo. This is a slog of a fight. Since you cannot simply defeat both of them, you see the boss health bar has to reach 0, and if it hasn't by the time both are dead, another one spawns. Thanks, I hate it. After that there's the Beast Clergyman, which is guarded by another damn tree sentinel. I of course beat the tree sentinel first try and most definitely didn't die to it more times than I did the Beast Clergyman in Malekith. Here I find the bosses to still be too fast and having way too long combos. It's just a feeling of Elden Ring being too slow for its own bosses, I don't know. Both the Beast Clergyman and Malekith look awesome though, especially Malekith. But the novelty wears thin when he's jumping around like a madman and melting your health bar in seconds. Still, my mimic and I managed to defeat him and are once again magically transported. This time back to Lanedale Castle. It's now crumbled and full of sand and really looks abandoned. Awesome. It's still, while destroyed, looks so cool. Alright, now it's been building up to a climax for quite a while. Time to finish this. Have you found a secret medallion? A friend of mine asks. So I rummage through my inventory and I see I have 2 pieces of a hailing tree medallion. I hesitantly say yes, and he just tells me to go where I took the lift up to the mountaintops. Lift the secret medallion, it says, and I am transported to a secret area tucked away in the far north of the map. Another snowy mountain area. I explore and find a teleporter which grants me passage to Mohg's domain. I begin exploring, and now on my second playthrough I just have to kill him with his own weapon. Oh, the irony. After this I travel back to the concentrated snowfields. I am still at this point ready to be done with the game, and the feeling of it being too long has really made its way up my spine. I find a magical town with a jail which transports me to an alternate version of the same town. It requires me to light 4 candles which are guarded by invisible bastards and heavy-hitting magic archers. This stretch is so tedious. You cannot see the invisible dudes before they attack you, and then it's too late. They hit incredibly hard and disappear as soon as they've backstabbed you. I manage to light all the candles and am presented with a teleporter which transports me to the hailing tree. This, as all the other areas of Elden Ring, is filled to the brim with beautiful details. I really have nothing negative to say about the way this game looks. I make my way through the hordes of enemies and find myself finding Loretta. The real one this time, and not a spectral form like earlier. She goes down and I make my way through the different areas and finally find myself in a room which leads to Melina, Blade of Mikola. If you only knew how many times I've heard that phrase. However, the game kept crashing when entering the arena, but it seems verifying the game cache on Steam does the trick. This is unfortunately a missed opportunity in my opinion. It may be because I'm terrible at the game, but her waterfowl dance is incredibly hard to dodge, and every time it hits me, her life bar goes back to full. This fight from the first second reminded me of the Lady Maria fight, but once I finally landed a parry, nothing happened. I tried again and again and learned that some sadistic mother-brother has made it so that you have to parry Melina 3 times before being able to do a minuscule amount of damage during the riposte. I mean, everything here is pretty much perfect. A super secret medallion one actually can find naturally by simply exploring the different areas of the world, and fighting a boss I almost had a harder time with than Melina herself. Then finding a super secret area with another secret area within. Fighting your way through a horde of incredibly unbalanced enemies that hit harder than any boss up to this point, and then you see her, sitting there, menacingly. She arms herself and then melts you in one combo. It's fitting but also way too unbalanced in my opinion. I've yet to find a consistent way of dodging her waterfall downs, and her second phase which sent these gals at you also wrecked me numerous times. I get why people are mad at this boss, and I also get why people are mad at Spirit Ashes, since there's no middle ground. I have always loved to be able to stomp bosses I find unfair, and Melina's waterfowl downs and her health regen is something I'd consider unfair. At least when she regens even if you block, which I don't really understand. And if she can summon help, so can I. I tried to stomp her with Mimic Me, but I couldn't DPS her enough to take her out. Therefore I sought help elsewhere. And that's where Let Me Help You came to the rescue. This lovely person helped me on my New Game Plus cycle with finally giving Melina what she deserved. It was hard, but we prevailed. I actually didn't manage to see what it did last couple of seconds because I wanted to change weapons and I spent way too long fiddling with it, and before I knew it she finally knew defeat. I then went back to the capital, finally ready to finish Elden Ring once and for all, and found Sir Gideon, the all-knowing guy at the Round Table Hold which had all the information about each demigod. He was sadly a pushover on both playthroughs. Then, at the Morgoth Arena, we now face the real Godfrey. He's got a few more moves, but I can't help but feel underwhelmed when I already fought him as a Golden Spectre. His first phase feels really good though. Tight hitboxes and quite easy tells. He looks awesome in my opinion, and I had a really fun time fighting him. Then, we get halfway through his health bar and he seemingly absorbs his giant ghost cat and announces, "I now fight as Horaloo." I'm sorry, but this lessens the fight in my opinion. I'm in the camp where I think not every boss needs two phases, especially when the first phase feels great and tight and the second becomes a delay fest only designed to trip you up. This also unfortunately changed my opinion of the first phase. It used to be awesome, but when I needed to go through it each time only to be bodied by Hulk Hogan, I lost interest quite quickly. I beat him eventually and looked over to my friend. "Now we're done, right?" He just looked guilty. I sighed and then I entered Radagon's arena. The introduction to Radagon looks so cool. It's almost always, in my opinion, super cool to finally fight the characters shown in the intro cutscene of the game, and Radagon really seems like a formidable foe. This fight is also a tight, pretty fair fight. However, it suffers from the overabundance of area of effect attacks. Also the fact you can get hurt by him simply teleporting to you, which I will forever hate, and goddamn stop! Still, I managed to finally will his health away, but of course one cannot simply have one phase. Out of Radagon's corpse comes the Elden Beast, a spectacle of an enemy and an incredible sight to behold. The arena also looks stunning, and as mentioned earlier, Miyazaki and company has done an incredible job of making this game look so awesome. However, this fight suffers on several areas in my opinion. Elden Beast has a bad habit of running extremely far away from you, and I remember finding it tedious to try to catch up to it, only for it to dive and then appear on the other side of the arena. And then there's this attack. I have yet to find a way to 100% avoid damage when it unleashes this. That said, with these grabs mentioned, this fight is pretty straightforward. It's a huge enemy that doesn't fit the camera and you cannot see half of what it does half the time. This fight, like many others in the game, devolved for me into a chore where I had to just finish to be done with it. And eventually, me and my buddies managed it. After completing Ronnie's questline, you can summon her and we get this ending, where she swears to the entire world that something and I really have no idea what this means really. Still, it felt good to finally beat the game after hundreds of hours defeating bosses, exploring, and dying. There's a million different mechanics that I feel really makes the game unique when it comes to the customizability of your build, as well as some incredible quality of life improvements. The latest patch also made some of these aforementioned improvements. However, since I feel like going through every single mechanic of this game would warrant a whole 7-hour special in and of itself, I want to focus on the ones I like the most. First of all, Stakes of Marika. Yes, these take away the tension of run back to bosses, but I'd be damned if I didn't praise the devs each time I died to a boss and then spawned right outside the arena because of Stake of Marika, so yes, more of these please. Then there's Torrent. This bad boy that perhaps doesn't fit well with every combat scenario does wonders for the traversal of Limgrave, and the fact you can loot while mounted is just incredible. I wouldn't put it past FromSoft to not add such a feature, so the fact that they did is such a welcome mechanic. Joseph Anderson said it perfectly. The guy who suggested looting while mounted should have a statue of himself in the middle of the office, picking up his crown while riding Torrent. Speaking of picking up loot, this little sparkle thing on enemies that drop items is also something that I really enjoyed. Since in earlier games I found myself killing enemies and then standing around waiting for the potential drop to appear. This time around we get an immediate tell if an enemy dropped any loot, which made looting and exploration a breeze. Another thing that made the exploration enjoyable was the implementation of removing stamina drain when outside of combat when running. This is such a pleasant feature. It makes the parts where torrent is out of order because of the blue line that much less tedious. Just not having to run, stop and walk until your stamina is back whenever out of combat really stood out to me as a great addition, and I do hope future installments also incorporate this feature. Exploration and build variety was one of the many things that hooked me to Elden Ring, and one of the things letting me experiment with builds was the great runes. Not only do you get insane power just from the runes you get from defeating each demigod, you also get the opportunity to seek out their great runes in divine towers spread out all over the map. This makes it so you don't simply get the power, but you really have to go out and work for each demigod's power, which I find really neat. Ashes of War really made the builds even more rare than before, alongside the great runes. Changing up one's attack by adding different ashes or making it so you can call forth an old ash of war to buff oneself is really cool in my opinion, and I had a lot of fun experimenting with different ashes. Normal weapons suddenly have way more versatility, and you can really spend hours customizing your different weapons with different ashes for the ultimate build. Although wild strikes are OP. Although I didn't really utilize the crafting to its full potential in any of my playthroughs, it still saved me a couple of times when needing arrows or other situational consumables. While talking about crafting, I want to talk a bit about the altering of gear as well. This is a mechanic in my opinion that I felt was a bit underdeveloped. Although I really liked being able to remove or add the cape of my armor, it would be really awesome to swap capes to other armor sets for more fashion. Either this or maybe some sort of transmog system where you can take your favorite armor stats wise and add the aesthetic of another armor set, making you both look cool as well as having the stats you need when questing. Speaking of, the side quests seem a bit easier to follow this time around in comparison to previous games, but I get more into it later. But one reason they seem a bit easier to follow is the implementation of the map. How the map starts out small and then grows exponentially as you progress is one incredibly cool way of subverting your expectations when traversing through the lands between. Later patches also added tons of new markers on the map, which makes it easier to see where you've been before. When exploring and finding new locations or NPCs, it adds that to the map without adding it to your compass, so you can easily find your way back if you need to, but not as in your face as other open world games. Another quality of life update was a glowing orb next to the upgrade flask prompt when at a site of grace. Personally, I've always just tested each time if I thought I had upgrades for the flask in older games, and the fact that we now have a small glowing icon next to the option really makes for a smoother experience in my opinion. Throughout my adventures in Elden Ring, I picked up a myriad of spirit ashes, and these were a fun addition in my opinion. Honestly, I found the difficulty of the bosses often a bit too high, but giving us the ability to summon spirit ashes, I felt like FromSoft made it so the odds could be stacked in the player's favor once again if one needed to. Especially the Mimic. The Mimic made me unstoppable, as you probably have seen earlier. I have read about takes that say utilizing the Mimic destroys the feel of the game, but I disagree. The Mimic and the other spirit ashes enhanced my enjoyment of the game, and really made it much less tedious to replay the harder bosses than it would have been without them. As I said, the side quests of Elden Ring, at least on the surface, seem a bit easier to complete this time around in contrast to older FromSoft games. At least the Lunar Princess Ranni's questline. It may be because I'm a bit too used to direction on where to go from other RPGs, but the side quests of the Soulsborne games have always had, in my opinion, too much ambiguity around them, making it easy to miss vital steps, leading to failing them. Ranni's quest, however, I must say, has the best balance between finding out for yourself where to go and the NPCs telling you where you should go looking. The only part I felt was a bit too similar to Dark Souls in side quest ambiguity is the Ranni doll interaction. Anyone new to the franchise, I would think, would give up talking to the doll after 1 or 2 tries without any response. Still, making it so you have to talk to the doll 3 times is still a reasonable amount. 3 times is the holy number in video games after all. Still, I do believe some may have missed out on their quest line because of the interactions with the doll and the upcoming boss. The final step of Ranni's quest is defeating the natural born of the void, and then continuing through. and either defeating or running past the randomly spawning dragon number 400. Here the game does a tremendous job of leading us through the hole in the ground towards Rani and thus completing her quest. The world of Elden Ring is not only filled to the brim with signs of grace, it has also been sprinkled quite generously with dungeons, caves and catacombs. These are smaller, more separated gauntlets with varying difficulty that either challenge your perception or your patience. I found these incredibly fun, and a nice break from the open world the first couple of times. But as soon as I hit dungeon, catacomb or cave number 26,425, I felt a bit burnt out. It felt like the catacombs had 4 or 5 different layouts and lengths, which got old quite quickly. The same goes for dungeons and caves. They all seem to follow the same blueprint, where one either had to progress to the end and fight the boss, or find the lever and then fight the boss. Or bosses. Often the damn guardian cat that still haunts me in my dreams, copied and pasted several times in a small cramped area. Let me out, God, please, God! And I found myself either skipping them or rushing through them, more often than not in the later parts of the game. All in all, Elden Ring managed something that few other games have the last couple of generations. Hooked me to the point it was all I thought about. Where should I go next and what will I encounter there? It occupied my entire mind. At least up until after the fire giant. I was already pretty burnt out from the duplicate bosses and in my opinion way too big endgame areas. And I can't really remember having this feeling on any of FromSoft's other games. So I think the incredibly large scale of the game made me burnt out by it before it was done showing me everything it had. It's unfortunately one of the reasons I don't really play open world games as much anymore, since they require a way bigger time and attention investment than I have the capacity to give them, and therefore I think that's where Elden Ring kind of lost me. Don't get me wrong, Elden Ring still deserves praise and criticism. I just wanted to share my thoughts on the game. I also have to mention the hordes of random dragons spawning that just appear from time to time. The first one was exceptional back in Limgrave. That's a memory I'll have forever. But the other ones I'll only remember as, oh, another one? Maybe except the first white dragon with red lightning. That shit was cool. As previously mentioned, the endings really only, at least to me, raises more questions than it answers. And I always end these games quite confused. Still, it's an incredible game and I did have a blast playing it. I am Browsley and thank you for listening.